Cageside with John Morgan.
And welcome everybody to another episode of Cageside with John Morgan. I'm your host, Eric McMahon. Did not have an episode last week. The way the days of the week fell, 4th of July weekend, offices were closed, couldn't put it up for distribution. But hey, happy birthday, America. So we're back this week. We couldn't preview the epic 290 International Fight Week card, UFC 290 that was in Las Vegas this weekend. But today we are going to recap it, and holy smokes, the card of the year so far, probably the fight of the year. Huge storylines coming out of this card. Let's not waste any time. I'm going to bring in the man. His name is on the marquee. You can follow him, John Morgan _MMA. He is John Morgan. What's up, pal?
Dude, I'm still kind of in the buzz of this event from this past weekend, man. As you said, card of the year. I honestly, I'm not one of those guys that likes to throw these superlatives out like this was the most amazing ever. But I really honestly believe like this was one of the greatest UFC events of all time. From start to finish, every fight was fun. You had amazing finishes along the way. You had history. You had championships. Honestly, one of the greatest UFC events I remember ever.
UFC 290, 4 knockouts in 38 seconds or less. Wrap your head around that on this highest level card in the highest level promotion.
That's crazy. And you need and moments like that, yeah, they're rare. So to happen 4 times in one night, and you may say, well, I mean, that means 4 quick fights, but then it was balanced out by some exciting decisions along the way. But even the decisions were exciting, kind of back and forth battles. But you need those highlight reel moments. You need those moments that you just put your hands on your head and you're like, oh my God, what did I just witness? And we got to see 4 of them, as you said, just right away, big finishes, man. I'm telling you, this card legit had everything.
It did have everything, and usually it's self-evident coming into this show every Monday is what the biggest takeaway of the card was. This one, I don't know what the biggest takeaway of UFC 290 was. So, with that being said, I'm not going to be on the hot seat about this. I'm going to put you on the hot seat. What's the biggest storyline? And then we can dive into there. But, let's just recap. The Volkanovski, the flyweight title fight, DDP coming out, making a statement, Robbie Lawler retiring. Like, where do we want to start, John Morgan?
It's unbelievable, man. It really is, because you're going on that. I mean, Nickal being the guy. I mean, there was just so many big statements. Part of me wants to start with Robbie Lawler just because of the legend that he is and what a great send-off it is. But I feel that would be a disservice to Alexander Volkanovski, who right now is either your number 1 or number 2 pound-for-pound fighter on the planet, I think, according to most people. To me, I still leave him at number 2 only because I have a hard time taking Jon Jones out of that position, given all that he's accomplished in his career, given the fact that he moved up to heavyweight. But if we're talking about, recent activities, I mean, this guy is staying busy. He's taking challenges. He's fighting the best. This dude is everything you could ever ask for in a champion. And Alexander Volkanovski, I thought that, potentially he would win this fight. Of course, I was picking him. He is a top pound-for-pound guy. But Yair Rodriguez, I was a little worried. A dangerous guy. And Alexander Volkanovski just absolutely nullified that danger in what turned out to be honest with you, a pretty dominating performance over an interim champion. I mean, a unification fight. And he dominates the interim champ. Unbelievable performance from Alexander Volkanovski.
Unbelievable. Alexander Volkanovski, 26-2, wins via TKO in round 3 versus the aforementioned Yair Rodriguez, the interim champ. He controlled from the jump. In reality, it was a one-sided fight. Somewhere in that 3rd round, the round that it ended in, Yair may have found a little bit of stride. But to me, after watching it back, it was really just kind of Volk being like, I showed you my ground. I'm going to show you my stand-up now.
Yeah.
And absolutely. I really think he was kind of playing that game and downloading a little information to kind of jump in with that shot that ultimately ended to like a spectacular finishing sequence, by the way.
Well, the whole performance was brilliant, and you're right about the finish. And it's funny because in Fight Week, at Media Day, Alexander Volkanovski said, hey, man, the thing about me is I like to beat guys at their own game. I like to show them that I'm better there. So don't be surprised if you see a little Taekwondo Volkanovski come out there. And that caught my attention to the point that at the press conference, I even asked Yair Rodriguez, I'm like, come on, you heard that. Do you believe there's any realm of possibility that he'll stand and try to, trade with you in the stand-up game, or that he's going to go straight to grappling? And it turns out Volkanovski wasn't lying. He knew that his grappling was going to be his bread and butter, but he didn't force himself to be there. It was more about, let me strike with you, and then I know that Yair is going to be throwing these crazy kicks at me, and if I can catch one of those crazy kicks, that's when I can take the fight to the ground, rather than me just going all out for the grappling. So it all worked perfectly. And then, as you said, the finishing sequence in the third round, just absolutely gorgeous. Threw out the jab, hurt Yair Rodriguez clearly, but didn't rush forward. Instead, kind of hesitated a little bit, switched stances, came in, and then took the fight to the floor and got it done with vicious ground and pound. I mean, it was just a beautiful finishing sequence. It just capped off what was just an absolute thorough performance from an absolute thorough fighter.
What it really showed me is that obviously we know Volkanovski has the talent. We know he is just a super athlete, right? We know he's a phenomenal fighter. The IQ, the fight IQ that Alexander Volkanovski has showed in this fight about why his IQ is on a different level as well, because he closed that distance very early, very fast, wouldn't give him the space, right? Wore him out by taking him down, beating him up a little bit. And then to your point of what you said, you asked Volkanovski and he said, I'm going to show you my stand-up too. He knew that, and he did it once Yair was a little depleted, a little, let's just be honest, not as confident, because he just took a whooping for 2 rounds. Yep. And then now chooses his time to be like, now I'm going to show you that my style on the feet is better than yours. So the IQ of just doing that and depleting the gas tank first, mentally beating him down before he does that, and then proves that point, that's here.
It's unbelievable. And to maintain that composure at all times, no matter what's going on. And Volkanovski came in with a healthy amount of respect for Yair Rodriguez. He said, look, I know this guy is dangerous, but to your point, it's like, in the striking game, there's kickboxing range where I'm outside a little bit and I have room to land kicks, which is where Yair Rodriguez is so dangerous. Then there's boxing range where the kicks are a little bit stuffed in too tight to really get off. Instead, you got to throw punches. And that's what Volkanovski was doing, is let me stay in your face in boxing range so that you're really not at a distance where you can land it. And it kind of makes sense because, as he said in this, he's always the smaller guy, the shorter guy. So he always has to really be a master of range management, and he showed it. But the tough thing about that is you've got to be athletic enough to continue the pace and the movement. You've got to have the cardio to know that you can rely on that for 5 rounds, and he did all that. I mean, he just really is unbelievable. As I said, at worst, he's your top 2 pound for pound, and I'll be honest with you, I had a really hard time in this week's UFC rankings leaving him at number 2, but I just have a hard time taking it away from John Jones, just knowing that John Jones hasn't ever been beaten. Volkanovski was beaten, but just barely, and that was in a move up to lightweight. It's a hard thing to do. I wish there was 1A and 1B, because, I mean, those 2 dudes are the best fighters on the planet right now.
Begs all the question. Dana White was asked about this in the press conference, I believe by you.
It was.
Where does Volkanovski go from here? Because, listen, there's nothing left for him to do at 45. They're just like, there isn't. And I know there's always going to be a next guy. There's always going to be a next guy. But we don't need to see it there anymore. So I know he's going on the shelf. Do we go up? Do we want to see the Makhachev instant rematch? Or do we just want him to jump into the 55? I think the Aljo fight could be fun, but at the expense, I think it'd be funner for him to go to 55. And now let's see what we got there.
There's so many options on the table, and you alluded to it there. He's going on the shelf a little bit. He needs a little scope on his elbow. He did say, by the way, he mentioned surgery in the cage. He came back afterwards and said, hey, sorry if I scared everybody. It's not a major surgery. It's a minor surgery, but I do need to get it addressed. He's like, give me 6-8 weeks. I'll be good to go. It's not going to be anything crazy. So not on the shelf for a long time. It's wild because you do have Ilia Topuria, who was cage side as well, and Alexander Volkanovski. You kind of mentioned his name a few times along the way, but I think you kind of hit the nail on the head that it's like, there's always going to be somebody else. And Ilia Topuria is an incredibly skilled fighter, a guy that looks like he could be the future of the division. But I say the future. It's kind of like remember when years and years ago Kyoji Horiguchi fought Demetrius Johnson, and we all kind of knew it was too early. We looked at Kyoji, he's like, that dude's going to be a monster, but it's a little too early right now. And I feel like Ilia Topuria would kind of be in that same situation where he looks like he's going to be a monster, but I don't know if he's ready for it. Aljamain Sterling would be a great one as well, because Aljamain, his cuts down to bantamweight are brutal. And he's got this fight coming up in August. If he's able to get past Sean O'Malley, he said, basically, I'm going to move up to 45. It wouldn't be a weird, fight where Volkanovski would just incredibly outsize him. So that's there. But I tell you what, I think timing is going to have a lot to do with this as well. You still need a main event right now in Abu Dhabi in October when the UFC returns there. They have promised their partners over there they will bring championship matchups. They've been holding Islam Makhachev, and with his name penciled in for that card. Thought it was going to be Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira has made it clear, hey, I'm not going to be ready by that date. So the way things are all unfolding, yeah, I think we might just see the rematch. And it seems crazy to be doing it again already, but I can't argue with it, man. That fight was so good. I mean, you're talking about two of the best martial artists on the planet going at it, champions of divisions right next to each other, the highest level of MMA. So you know what, man? That fight was so close. Normally, I don't necessarily love the idea of doing rematches right away, but gosh dang it, Volkanovski just went down, defended his title again. He's not holding up any division. I say let him go back up and do it, man. I kind of want to see it again.
In a weird way, I do want to see it again. I want to preference all this with saying I want to see it again. But I also want to see a Volk against other 155ers too. So, do I think that Volkanovski can go in there and compete with any 155-pounder in the world? Yes. And I want to see him do it. And then I want to build that just mega call. Imagine this scenario, right? Volkanovski runs through 2 of the top 5 55ers in the next year. Makhachev is still the champion. What would that fight then look like?
Oh my goodness, that would be amazing if he kind of proved it. I mean, I think he already proved by his performance he deserves to be there. But you're 100% right. Volk threw one out there too. He was like, "What about the winner of Poirier and Gaethje? How about I get myself a BMF title too? Let me go for 3 belts." I mean, and I'm looking at those lightweight rankings, and you're so true, man. Like I said, the winner of Poirier Gaethje for the BMF title, that would be unbelievable. But you look at names besides Makhachev. You look at Charles Oliveira, Beneil Dariush, Michael Chandler. I mean, gosh, those are all incredible fights. So
can you imagine a Michael Chandler Volkanovski fight?
Come on. I mean, that would be an incredible. Stylistically, the wrestling between those two, the power between those two. Oh man, it would be amazing.
So that's kind of like the options and the scenarios is why I might not want to see the rematch right away, because Volkanovski at 55 just gets my juices pumping about what he can do. And listen, he's top 5 already. Put him into the top 5. I don't need to see anything outside of the top 5.
It's true. Oh, absolutely. I mean, the guy already took the champ the distance into a fight that I did score for Islam Makhachev, but as we said, very, very, very close. Incredibly competitive, razor thin. So, yeah, I mean, you already took the champ the distance. You're right there.
So, man, we could probably talk scenarios all day, but we have a loaded show, so we have to get moving on. Alexander Pantoja, 26-5 wins via split decision against Brandon Moreno in a fight that, listen, everybody knew Brandon Moreno comes to put on a show every time. We know the history, or at least the UFC did a phenomenal job telling us the history in this rivalry. 2-0 already. But that fight, I texted people who did not buy the pay-per-view, and I said, this fight alone could be one of the greatest fights I have ever seen, and I would have paid double just to watch that fight live. Unbelievable.
Yeah. I was thinking of it afterwards. I'm like, man, that has to be one of the greatest UFC flyweight title fights in promotional history. And I thought, you know what? that's limiting it too much. It's not just one of the greatest flyweight titles. That's just one of the greatest title fights you've ever seen. I mean, the heart that was on display, the ebbs and the flows of the back and forth of how they battled it out. I mean, unbelievable. And the crowd made it amazing, by the way. I don't know how well it came across on the pay-per-view, but the Mexican crowd, man, they showed up this week in Las Vegas, and it was just absolutely, I mean, the ovations and the cheers and it was an incredible atmosphere, and these two athletes put it on the line, pushed until the very end, and Pantoja, I thought, walked away as the rightful winner. And I mean, just one of the greatest fights you'll ever see. It was amazing. It was amazing.
One, the crowd did come across the pop that Brandon Moreno got when his mariachi music started playing. It was like, whoa. And here's something, because 45 was in the house. He always gets a great reception. Listen, first of all, let's talk about 45 really quick. Does this man know his audience, or does he know his audience?
He knows his audience, man. He went out there and he comes in. I mean, the DJ plays Kid Rock's American Badass, and he walks in there and he's playing to the crowd. And man, it's wild. Every time he walks in there, he gets a pop. It's wild.
But then the Brandon Moreno pop, right? And if you just put him in comparison, right? Brandon Moreno is a win or lose. This kid, I don't even say this baby-faced assassin, is a superstar. Unbelievable. And for that fight to play out the way it did, with the rivalry, and I mean, the fight almost leaves me speechless, because we can get into the scorecards here in a minute, but this fight is going to stand up against any fight in promotional history. Now, it may have been marred by they were both so fatigued in that 5th round, and just kind of the hanging on the back and whatnot. I get it, man. You're riding out your way to a victory. But this fight stands alone against any fight in promotional history. Stands up to it.
Yeah, no, I agree. No, it really does. And it's because of a lot of things you said. I mean, not only just the quality. Like, if it was any two dudes, like if it was just any two random guys you picked off the roster and they played out in that way, you would say, wow, what an incredible fight that was. Because, again, it had those ebbs and flows. That, to me, is a great fight when it's back and forth. And one guy's winning one round and another guy's winning here. And, oh, my gosh, he's about to get finished. I mean, those, to me, make great fights. But when you add in the history between these two, when you add in the fact that it was a championship fight, the belt was on the line, it just had all those things that you have to add in to really make it a phenomenal fight. And again, I mean, the character that was on display, I mean, Pantoja, wins the round on all 3 cards, I should say. So, I mean, he gets out to a great start, drops Moreno right away. But then round 2, Brandon Moreno, Pantoja's like, I'm going to get this thing finished now. He comes out to be a killer. And Moreno's like, nope, no, you're not. Let me throw this jab in your face. Let me touch you up a little bit. And he wins all 3 judges' scorecards in the second round. And then from then on, it was just back and forth and tooth and nail. And yeah, as you said, maybe slowed down a little bit at the end. But and I will say there were a couple boos in there where I just kind of looked at the crowd and I was like, are you serious, man? Like, you're booing right now? Like, come on, man. Like, let these dudes catch their breath just for a second. But I mean, just phenomenal. And then it goes all the way to it had everything. It was well worth the price. I really hope there was somebody, and there has to be somebody, that was their first pay-per-view they ever bought. And they were like, you know what? I'm in for this, because I guarantee you, man, they're hooked for life. They were treated to something special this weekend.
That's kind of like me with UFC 1, the opening fight. UFC 1, I still remember I was in 7th grade, streaming on the illegal black box. For the one guy comes out, knocks him down, kicks him straight in the face. I was like, I'm all in on this, right? And so, somebody's going to have that aha moment where they've never seen it before, and this is going to be the catalyst for the fandom of, like, me and you. I kind of love what you just said right there, but scorecards were all over the place. But the right man won, and so I don't really see a lot of controversy. I mean, everybody wants to pick in this 49-46. A lot of people are jumping on that scorecard. I don't know what to make of it. I don't really want to comment on the judging, because the right man won.
Yeah, fortunately, the right man won, so I don't think it's necessarily controversy. Ben Cartledge was the judge that at 49-46, Brandon Moreno. He's catching a lot of heat. I can tell you, I know Ben personally. I've had many conversations with him about the sport over the years, and he is as committed and dedicated of a professional and cares about the sport and cares about the process of judging and takes it very, very seriously. And so, I look forward to speaking with him in the future about how he got the card. He's actually based in Europe, so he was flying back over the weekend. But again, as you said, I mean, there were some razor thin. I mean, rounds 1 and 2 were the same on all 3 cards, right? All 3 had 1 for Pantoja, all 3 had 2 for Moreno, and then it was 3 through 5, which were close rounds. To be honest with you, the 2 judges that gave it to Pantoja had it 48-47. They had 1, 3, and 5. My personal scorecard, I even had it 49-46 Pantoja. I gave him the 4th as well, but very, very close rounds along the way. So a great fight. But as you said, yeah, maybe a little bit questionable, but I guess in this situation, the system worked, right? The right man won. 2 of the 3 judges got it the way that we agree. So, yeah, a little bit of discussion point, but I do believe the right man was given.
I can see how 4 may have went to Moreno, just because he did reverse position, landed some big strikes in the last minute. And, a lot of times when Pantoja had the back, he wasn't doing any damage and he wasn't threatening the submissions a lot. So based on criteria, yeah, I could see how that reversal in the last minute landed like 3 or 4 heavy strikes, shifted the balance power. I don't agree. I think if you're dominating somebody from a positional standpoint, you're winning the fight. But from a criteria standpoint, I could see how Moreno gets that 4th round. But I personally had it 4-1 Pantoja.
Interesting. Good. I thought I was out on an island there, and that's the way I had it as well. And you're right. The new criteria, the updated scoring criteria, I mean, damage is supposed to value over everything else, but I don't know. I mean, again, I've said this before, like I appreciate the effort to change the criteria and to continue evolving the sport, but I don't necessarily love the way it's laid out now because, when you talk about damage, I mean, yes, that is what matters most is the most immediately impactful blows. But this is not like some video game where they have damage meters where we can see like, oh, well, that was a 14% hit right there, so he wins. So it's very subjective, and I tend to agree with you. When you have that positional control, when you have submission threats, when you have dominance over it, like that has to matter for something. So I do, and you know what's crazy is all 3 judges actually had that 4th round for Brandon Moreno, and they're all, of course, highly trained and highly focused on utilizing the updated criteria. So, I will be the first one to step back and say, hey, maybe I had that one wrong. But it just goes to show you the nature of the criteria stuff. And I think it just goes to show you how close the fight was that, professionals that are doing this is all they do, they had it different ways.
And, but we're both grappling enthusiasts.
True.
So
that is true.
Does sway things. You know what I mean?
That is true. Even if it's subconsciously, I think you're right.
Right. Well, and I know from fighting and I know from still actively competing in jiu-jitsu how hard and how tough it is to get the match or the fight where you want it. I understand how tough that really is. So like just discrediting position control and discrediting the length of time to be able to hold that positional control, because it's all difficult to get it there and then to hold it there. To discount that for 1 or 2 punches, I don't agree with.
Yeah. And listen, I mean, again, they're talking about what's the most damaging blows, which one has the, the ability to finish the fight. But, carrying somebody's weight for 3 minutes causes damage and fatigue. You know what I mean? Worrying at all times that the rear naked choke come in and end this fight right away. I mean, a submission, I only need 1 submission to get in, whereas a punch, I might need to land multiple shots to get you rocked and then let, what I mean? So I think sometimes you're right. And I think you're 100% right. And I didn't really, you and I are both grappling enthusiasts, so we probably do put a little bit more emphasis in there than is necessary. But I think it's because we value, as you said, what it takes to get it there and what the person that's on the defensive is suffering through right now, which a lot unseen is worse than, taking a shot. So great. But
you want to talk about
it doesn't
damage?
take away. It's a great fight.
Yeah. You want to talk about damage though? An unseen damage is the amount of pressure and stress and fatigue a body triangle puts on you.
Yes.
Pantoja had a body triangle for 3 minutes on him.
It's painful. It's frustrating. It, as you said, it makes breathing difficult. It fatigues you. I mean, there's a lot into that. And I just don't think you can completely discount that.
I wholeheartedly agree. But with all that being said, it's 3-0 Pantoja. You got to run it back, though. You have to.
Man, it's tough, right? So you had Brandon Royval there as a backup. You know, he weighed in for the fight, and he said all along, I know they're not going to use me. These dudes are professional. They'll be good. But, you know, at least I can get a training camp in. At least I can establish myself as the number one contender. He weighed in at the official weigh-ins, and he's like, hey, I got next. He said it verbally. He's there. You got Amir Albazi, who's out there saying, hey, I know we need title fights in Abu Dhabi. You know, that's part of the commitment that the UFC has made to their partners in Abu Dhabi. So, well, you know, why not let me go over there? The crowd will love me over there. Why don't we do the flyweight title there? So those are two names that are in the hat. But, you know, and I asked Dana White about this on Saturday night. It's wild. I mean, normally you have a close, incredibly exciting fight. The champion hands over the belt. You say, oh, let's run that back because it was an amazing fight and we want to give the champion another chance. But it's 3-0. It's 3-0. But to Dana's credit, he did say, I know, and I know it's weird, but none of us complained about seeing Brandon Moreno and Davison Figueiredo a fourth time. I don't think anybody's going to complain about seeing this fight a fourth time, and I have to agree. So you've got three real logical options.
His exact verbiage to your question was, who in this world wouldn't want to see that fight again?
I didn't see any hands go up. I didn't see any hands in that press room go up.
So one thing that I didn't realize, because he didn't show it, but I actually read yesterday that Brandon Moreno broke his hand in the first.
Yeah, that was revealed as well. So Brandon Moreno did break his hand in the first round, which just, I mean, doesn't that just add to the greatness of the performance even more that you know that he was dealing with that and he still fought the way he did? So I think that's going to I think that's really what it's going to boil down to. Bottom line is these two dudes are going to fight again. Whether it's going to be next, we shall see. And that's going to, you know, maybe Brandon wants a little bit of time off. Again, he's got to heal this broken hand. I mean, timing comes down to everything, right? I mean, part of Amir Albazi's play is, you know, hey, listen, I'm based in the Middle East. You know, you need to give a title fight to the Abu Dhabi crowd. Why not throw me in there? So, I mean, scheduling and timing, it all factors in. I think the bottom line that we can walk away knowing is that we will see a fourth fight between these two. Whether or not it's going to be next, I don't know, but we will see it. And it's because we all want to. I mean, that's how great will it be?
I would be missing a huge moment just as a father if I did not mention Pantoja's throwaway line. I mean, like, I left everything in Brazil to come do this with my family, having nothing. My mom did a great job raising me and I believe he said brother alone. Mm-hmm. Dad, are you proud of me now?
Whew. Deep, man. Deep. As he had his own children around him, you know, his own family in there. I mean, just, you know, I'm not going to be that dad. You know what I mean? Chills, man. Chills. As you said, as a father, man, it's all we want. And to hear a moment like that where it's like, man, you know, my mom, and she took care of everything. Dad, where you at? You know, like, look at me now. Look at me now.
Okay, so I don't want to discredit what he said because I actually have goosebumps right now because as a father, I could never even freaking imagine not being there for my children. Like, it is despicable to me, right? But you want to talk about a babyface moment? You want to talk about Brandon Moreno was the clear, like, let's use wrestling storyline, right? He was the babyface. Pantoja was the heel, right?
Yeah. Got booed all week.
And you know what? That was a babyface moment for him because he became the guy that overcame. He became the guy that literally just put every single thing he had into that fight, won it by the narrowest margins, and you looked at him like he's not Brandon Moreno's opponent. This is a real person. This is a real person who's overcome stuff, and I like that guy for everything he did. That's what I took out of that.
You have to. I mean, I think there wasn't as much interest coming into this fight as there should have been just because most people don't really know Pantoja that well. You know, he's really, first of all, he's not a big trash talker. He's a very humble, respectful dude, kind of quiet by nature. Secondly, he didn't really speak a lot of English. He started to. Now he's doing his interviews in English. Now he's trying to avoid using a translator at all unless he just wants to make sure he understands what the context of the question was. So he's speaking to the audience now. And you know, I always say, I know that's tough for foreign fighters because it's like, well, why do I have to learn English? Why don't they learn my language? Bottom line is most of the business gets done in the United States, and the biggest paying audience is in the United States. So if you can speak English, it's just going to help you connect even more. And he's doing that. And as you said, to know that and then to lay that out there. I mean, how do you walk away from that not liking that guy, not caring about when he fights next, not wanting to see him again, and not want to see him succeed? So it was a phenomenal moment for Alexandre Pantoja. And I mean, as you said, I mean, it's funny because, you know, you use the pro wrestling terminology, but he nailed all the things except that, you know, a real fight. I mean, even to the point that he's, you know, collapses at the end because he's so exhausted and full of emotion. I mean, it was pure theater, but it was all 100% honest and incredible. And it was just it was an amazing moment. I think people are going to care about what this dude does next, whether it involves Brandon Moreno or not.
I am.
Yep.
So there we go. All right. Those were huge moments, and I laid it out to you. Where was the big moment? Where was the big storyline? Let's get into that first. I actually was setting you up, and I think you didn't go where I thought you were going to go. To me, the biggest moment in this fight, or in this card, the biggest storyline of this card, UFC 290, the biggest show of the year, Dricus Du Plessis shocks the world. Listen, I know everybody knows he's tough. He's herky-jerky. He's hard to deal with. He hits like a tank. Nobody gave him a shot. Nobody gave him a shot, right? He shocks the world, and he comes out. He sits down Robert Whittaker with a jab, okay? He took down Whittaker, right?
Yep.
He took down Whittaker. Guess who could not sit down Robert Whittaker? Right? Yoel Romero, who could not take down Robert Whittaker. Yoel Romero.
Unbelievable. No,
DDP does it. Unbelievable.
You know, it's funny because coming into this fight, I was trying to tell people, listen, I think this fight is going to be a lot more competitive than anybody's giving him credit for, but I was still picking Robert Whittaker. You know, I was like, look, this is going to be a war. Understand, Dricus Du Plessis is an absolute specimen. He's a savage, and he's going there, and he's going to make this a battle. It's one of the reasons I wasn't too high on the possibility of these guys turning around and doing it late, and 9 weeks later in Sydney against Israel Adesanya. But I think Dricus Du Plessis, after some initial struggle, you know, at first Robert Whittaker's doing what Robert Whittaker does, man. He's bouncing in and out of the pocket. He's moving. He's just so precise in his movement, in his footwork, and his attacks. And I'm like, yep, there's the clinician in there. He's doing his thing, man. He's putting on the clinic in there. It's phenomenal. And then Dricus really kind of turned the tide, as you said, got that takedown. Maybe not the most pretty takedown of all time, but he just muscled his way into it. He got it done.
Yeah,
it was effective.
It was a headlock throw.
Yeah. Did his damage, you know what I mean? And stole the round late. And it was funny because I was sitting on the side that was in Dricus's corner. And as he turned around to come back to his corner at the end of round one, he had a smile on his face. It was one of those like wry smiles, like, oh yeah, I got it. Like, I know what's about to come out. And it sure did. In the second round, he came out and he got the finish. Very, very impressive finish. And then the UFC wasted no time in just making it official. Israel Adesanya was there, Cageside, and they said, you know what? Let's not hint that maybe this is the next fight. Let's not talk about that you're probably the number one contender. Let's just bring in the champ and let's do a face-off right now.
I want to get there, but there was an not mentioned storyline in this fight that I think had huge dividends in it. Now let's rewind. DDP, I'm going to start using that because it's just a long name to pronounce, right?
Yeah.
It throws off my vibe when I say it. You know what I mean?
DDP sounds cool. You know what I mean? It does sound pretty cool.
So DDP, if we watch his fights, he never garnered the respect that he did because he looked like he would gas out so hard in a lot of fights. Even he's saying, I still got cardio and I'm good. He just looked like he had emptied the tank very early in the fight, and albeit still win, and albeit a lot of times he had to, how did he win some of these fights, right? Mm-hmm. Then we come to find out that leading up into before this training camp started, he gets his nose fixed. He could never breathe out of his nose. He never looked like he was breathing hard in this fight. Now, granted, it only went 2 rounds, but still in past fights, he looked like he was going to be scraped off the canvas after one.
Yeah. You know, it's funny because a lot of people kind of picked on him for that after he revealed that. And they're like, oh, come on, what's this guy talking about? Robert Whittaker actually at Media Day, it was kind of funny because he said, I'll be honest with you. He was like, even I hearing that, like I kind of laughed it off. Like, what's this dude talking about? And he's like, and then one day I got a stuffy nose and I went into practice and I realized how exhausted I was. And I was like, yeah, if you can't breathe through your nose, that really does impact your cardio. And so you're right, man. I do think he caught a lot of heat for it. A lot of people felt like, Dricus was making some kind of excuses or, just making up like, come on, man, how much is this really going to be helping you get better? But it really does, and because he said it, he's like, look, I know I look fatigued. He's like, I'm not, I can go. He's like, I'm there. I still got the power. I still got the effort. He's like, I just can't breathe through my nose. So my mouth is wide open and I look like I'm gasping for air the whole time. And it has to be impacting his cardio to a degree. But as even he said, he's like, even if it doesn't necessarily impact my cardio, it just impacts the way I look. And he's like, I know that looks bad to fans. I know it looks bad to judges. He's like, but that's all I can do. I have to kind of have my mouth wide open and gasping for air because that's the only way I can breathe in this intense physical contest. So look, it could be a very big thing in his career moving forward. I asked him about it leading into it and he's like, well, I don't want to go too much into that. And he said, I think not that he was embarrassed by it, but he was frustrated, I think, at the amount of heat that he caught for it. But I really do think it's going to be impactful in his career.
I think we saw how impactful it's going to be already, right?
Yeah.
So, all right. Now to where the drama starts. If that wasn't enough, him, like, I think he was a 3.5-1 dog in that fight.
Yep.
Sits him down, finishes him, ground and pound. By the way, vicious body shot to really sit down. That's what really sat down.
Great shot selection, right? Went to the body, through the uppercut. I mean, that's great when you see you have somebody hurt, but you don't rush it. You take the time. You're aware of it. You see where the openings are, and you take the openings that are given to you. Beautiful.
Yeah. Then Izzy gets in the cage and maybe marred, maybe not. I don't know, depending on what situation you looked at it. But clearly, this fight is set up. And we knew Izzy, the disdain he has for DDP. We know it. He said it in the past. He's make no bones about it. Dricus kind of really did a good job not playing into it at the moment all that much. Did say afterwards, he's just a clown and this, that, and the other. But you asked Dana White about this in the press conference. Now, listen, I don't want to get into like what really happened because there are racial undertones to it, regardless if anybody wants to admit it or not. There are. Okay. And I don't think it's manufactured. Now, I don't think Dricus is really throwing it out there as, calling him, he's saying he's not black or not African. I don't think that, but Izzy is taking it that way. So to say that there's not racial undertones to it is just not being factually honest. Correct. You asked Dana White that question in the press conference, and it seemed like it kind of upset him. I don't know if he was upset by the question or if he was confused that people are really looking at it that way. I don't know. Take it from there, John.
Yeah, it's interesting because he basically just, as you said, seemed to kind of get a little upset, and he's like, who said what? You know what I mean? I'm like, well, Izzy did get on the mic and drop a lot of N-bombs right in the middle of, this amazing pay-per-view event. And he's like, well, he's a black guy. He can say whatever he wants to say. Like, what do you want me to do? They're going to fight. And that's good. And my biggest concern in asking about it was just like, hey, do you want to maybe get in these guys' ears and say, hey, guys, can we shy away from this a little bit? Because does it really need to be built all around that? And I don't, we'll see how it's all handled.
Which I do think tremendously fair because you're saying the marketing up to it. If one guy feels this way, then that's going to be his underlying storyline going up. I think you asked the great question. Are you comfortable with that? And he sounded surprised by it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And like I said, it's been kind of funny the fallout on social media and some of the things that people, you're this race baiting liberal reporter or whatever. Like, come on, man. I'm just curious because honestly, what it reminds me a lot of is like Conor McGregor and Khabib Nurmagomedov and the build up to that, where it was so dark. And even Dana White has admitted that, like, it was one of the heaviest fight weeks that we've ever had in the UFC. And then look, you saw things like in the arena afterwards, you saw groups of like Irish guys fighting groups of Dagestanis. And I just like, man, do you want to be careful that that's not what this becomes? You know what I mean? Because look, there is going to be heat in this fight. I mean, Israel Adesanya is pissed off, and it's not manufactured. It's not him selling the storyline. He is upset, and there's going to be some major tension between these two. But that was my question to Dana, is like, do you need to be careful about this? Do you need to worry about this? And I've actually spoken to him since after the press conference, and he was like, look, man, this is what we do. We got to put the fights on. He's like, yes, we're going to make sure that we do it in the safest way possible, and that, you know, everything. But look, these dudes hate each other, but that's the great thing about the fight game is, man, no matter what you think about somebody else, you can get in the cage and you can prove your superiority there. You know, you can work out your differences right there over the course of 5 rounds. So this fight is going to have some serious heat on it. It's going to be a big one.
And, you know, call me a clickbait guy. I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to see the buildup because, like, listen, this is as real as it gets.
It is. It's 100% true. Because if you go back to Dricus's original, comments, they weren't factually incorrect, but the what's inferred in there, I mean, you can't deny that it's there. And so, I mean, the tension is there. It's going to be great. Look, it looks like, the idea is potentially to have this thing in Sydney. Again, that's a little less than 9 weeks now from now. I did ask Dricus if he would be ready. I asked Dana if he'd be ready, and Dana's comments were, hey, listen, we don't approach it right away. We let a guy kind of settle in, have his moment, and then we'll talk about it. I asked Dricus, hey, Dana said he's not going to rush you, but do you think it's possible? And he said, well, I think Dana's a smart man. You know what I mean? Like, right now, I'm just going to celebrate and we'll figure it out. So nobody wanted to make any commitments to it, but there's still a big pay-per-view in Sydney, in September, and I think that's going to, barring, we find out that Dricus had some kind of sustained injury that we didn't see, that wasn't evident. I think that's the fight that gets booked for that pay-per-view headliner, and it's going to be huge. It is going to be a spectacular fight.
And with all that looking forward, I have to be remiss to say that we cannot look past how damn good he looked Saturday night against the absolute savage that is Robert Whittaker.
It was funny, man. The ceremonial weigh-ins, when they came together for their face-off, and you saw, like, Dricus just towering over him, I'm like, holy God, I forgot how big. I mean, I didn't forget, but just when you see them next to each other and you see, I was like, wow. And Dricus said it on Saturday night. He's like, look, Israel Adesanya, great striking. Yeah, but if I get my hands on him, if I get him to the ground, it's not even going to be a fight. I'm going to manhandle him. And look, easier said than done. Adesanya is a master of movement, a master of range management. His striking is incredible. It's not as easy. There's been a lot of people that said, hey, if I can just get this guy to the ground, I'll beat the kickboxer. And guess what? They don't get him to the ground. They can't hold him there. So it's easier said than done. But if Dricus can get his hands on him, if he can hold him to the ground, he is an absolute savage. And this is going to be a fantastic fight.
All right, moving forward, we kind of got a speed rush through this, but the Hooker Jalin Turner fight, what a war. Unbelievable. I don't know what else we need to say. You got anything on that fight?
Just an absolute battle. I mean, Dan Hooker ends up breaking his arm in the second round, and yet the rounds he won were round 2 and round 3. I mean, just unbelievable. Jalin Turner looked fantastic early on, really, and you're like, oh, man, it's going to be another rough night for Dan Hooker. And it looked like he was going to be finished, and then Hooker just completely turns the tide and wins round 2 and 3, walks away. I mean, just a phenomenal fight that would have been fight of the night had it not been for the flyweight championship fight, which was incredible. And then a fight that provided one of those social media posts where it's like both guys are in the hospital together. And I'm sorry, it's such a weird thing to say, but it's just so cool for two dudes to go in there and throw down like that. And then they're hanging out at the hospital together, and it's nothing but respect. Those two dudes will be friends until the end now after going through that together.
Did you see the New Zealand contingency celebrating in the locker room?
Unbelievable, right? I mean, the
Volkanovski's
guys
ready
together.
For a fight. They're jumping around.
And they were fired up. Unbelievable.
All right, now late replacement Val Woodburn gets starched by Bo Nickal, who cruises to victory. I believe Bo Nickal, 5-0 now? 4-0, 5-0?
Yeah, 5-0. Listen, Bo Nickal's the real deal. It's wild because coming into it, when Val Woodburn steps in there, Chris Curtis had posted, wait till Bo Nickal tries to take down a fire hydrant, and he's going to realize that's a little tough. And he did, actually. He went to go in for the takedown, and Woodburn didn't even move. I mean, he's a tank of a human being. And so Bo Nickal turned to his striking and just lit him up on the feet. Guys got hands as well. And then gets on the mic and cuts a promo talking about what a blessing it is to be a great husband and a great father. I mean, just sending positive vibes out there in the community. Goes, I know, right? I mean, you talk about baby face. How about that? You know what I mean? Yeah. Listen, Bo Nickal's the real deal. Listen, we have yet to see Bo Nickal fight elite level competition, and we don't know what's going to happen when he does get to that elite level. But what we can see is that he is an incredible athlete, an incredible competitor, takes this late notice replacement and does what he absolutely should. A guy, by the way, a late notice replacement that was undefeated to that point in his career. So not just some tomato can that was brought in on the streets, but an actual legit prospect. Dana did talk about on Saturday night, there's no need to rush this guy. We don't need to throw him to the wolves right away. He's got time on his side. Let's let him develop. But the raw materials and the base for building an incredible fighter are there for Bo Nickal. So I'm excited to continue to monitor his rise. You
set it up perfectly that we're not going to rush this guy. We're not going to, throw him to the wolves. I disagree. Okay. And I'm going to tell you why. Bo Nickal has an attribute. He has a championship attribute. Just his mind game. That's for one. And then number two, he has a style in his wrestling and grappling ability that was world class coming into this. World class. Now, when I'm talking world class, not world class for the UFC, world class for the world. Right. And he is such on a high level that and with the threat of the wrestling, it opens up his hands, which we saw this weekend, that I'm not saying he goes top 5 now, but what I am saying is we need to, for that hype train of Bo Nickal to keep going where I hope it goes, because I believe in him. I believe he could be like one of the second coming, right? I truly do. But to keep that going, I need to see a name side by side.
No, I agree with you.
Right.
No, I agree with you. I think, you probably can't get away with more than maybe another fight, maybe 2 if you want to push it, considering he does turn around pretty quickly. He fights pretty quickly. So, 1, 2 maybe tops before you got to go with a ranked opponent. And listen, I absolutely believe, as you said, top 5 right now. And that's the thing, do I think he can beat Israel Adesanya right now? I mean, maybe stylistically his wrestling is pretty dang good, but there's a lot of other things that come along with it. The Robert Whittakers of the world, the Dricus Du Plessis of the world, that upper tier. I guess Alex Pereira, if you still want to classify him, as a middleweight. But, the top 10, top 15 down there, I mean, there's some names in there. You look at the rankings right now: Chris Curtis, Andre Muniz, Nasruddin Imavov, Kelvin Gastelum, Brendan Allen, Jack Hermanson. Can he be competitive against those guys? Yeah. I mean, would they be stiff tests for him? Yeah, they would be. That's why they're in the top 15. But as you said, the base of his skills, his wrestling is off the charts. His athleticism off the charts. And I think you hit the nail on the head, too, when you talk about his mindset. That's what separates him as well. So the physical tools are there. That's for sure.
I want to end with Robbie Lawler. He ended it with a walk-off KO, so I want to end it there. But I do need to talk really quick about a fighter making his promotional debut, or was supposed to make his promotional debut on Saturday night, Josh Harrell, who I'm just going to kind of read this. One day prior to his scheduled promotional debut at UFC 290, Harrell was removed from his bout when a pre-fight medical testing shows he has a rare, previously undetected brain disease. Harrell, 24, was diagnosed with myomia, a disease that can cause blood clots in the back of the brain. And then they figured out on a pre-fight MRI. First time he ever got his brain scan. That's a big difference between fighting regional and then fighting at the UFC. The extra level of testing that they have to go through, and he has to go in and have brain surgery now. Yeah, how scary.
Pretty scary. I mean, he's positive that it can be treated, and there is a way. It doesn't necessarily mean the end of his fighting career, but it does mean that he's got some things to address before he can. But you're absolutely right. I think, just credit to the UFC, credit to the state of Nevada as well, and the Athletic Commission for requiring the high-level medical tests. And obviously the UFC does the highest level of testing as well. My understanding as well that, as the first test it was like a little bit of an abnormality. They weren't sure, so they went back and had additional testing just to make sure. So, I mean, credit to everybody involved. And you're absolutely right. I mean, that's, the state of Nevada and the UFC both deserve credit for having that commitment to the highest level of safety standards. I think it was brought up in the press conference that the UFC spends nearly like $10 million a year, or minimum, I should say, of $10 million a year when it comes to just health and safety commitments. So kudos to everybody involved because potentially saving somebody's life.
Yeah, you want to talk about if this kid never got into the UFC and got that level of testing, this is something that possibly very well could have killed him. A blood clot in the brain.
Crazy. Talented kid too. Undefeated as a professional. So wishing the best. A great nickname, the muscle hamster. So hopefully everything goes well with him and he can get this treated and he can get back. So, he's a stud athlete.
But that's just like, yeah, I mean, you said it correctly. Shout out Nevada, shout out UFC for requiring this because yes, a lot of people say it's human cockfighting. Guys like me and you are going to say it's competition, but at the end of the day, they do have the best interest of the fighters at heart.
Yep. Fighter safety number one above all else, and it really is, and it has always been that way for the UFC, and they continue to show it. And terrible situation for Josiah Harrell, but I'm glad that it got done, and hopefully we wish him well, and hopefully we get to see him back in the UFC.
Absolutely, hope we're all hoping for that. Now we got to end it. How can you not get how is MMA not romantic? How is it not romantic when you get a storybook walk-off KO victory and then a tribute video and you get a very stoic Robbie Lawler who never changes his expression crying in the middle of the octagon? How can you not be romantic about mixed martial arts?
One of the coolest send-offs I've ever seen. Robbie Lawler, who's been fighting at the highest level of sport for over 20 years, signed with the UFC when he was 19 years old, left the promotion for a while, came back, won the championship, has turned in just incredible highlights throughout his career. I mean, vicious, ruthless Robbie Lawler was the perfect nickname for him, and decided that he had enough. And the kind of guy that he is, apparently was never going to tell anybody, was just going to fight his last fight and walk away. And Dana White actually made it a point to announce that, hey, by the way, Robbie Lawler, this is going to be his retirement fight, so that everybody could talk to Robbie Lawler about it, and everybody, could know that it was going to be the last time we got to see him. And he was treated so well all week long by fellow fighters and fans. One of the things I said, and I truly mean it, man, in my history in the sport, I don't know if I've ever seen another fighter that's so universally loved and revered and respected by his peers as Robbie Lawler. Like, you will not find a person on the roster with a bad thing to say about Robbie Lawler as a fighter or as a human being. And he goes in there and everything about it was beautiful, from the moment he got in the cage where he took an extra second and just kind of looked around and addressed the crowd. And I literally had chills I'm like, this guy, as you said, who's not the most emotional dude, he's not the most outspoken dude, is really taking a moment to soak this in, gets in there, gutted for Niko Price, of course. I mean, Niko Price, a guy that said, man, we asked him about what's it like to know that this is Robbie Lawler's retirement fight. And he's like, this is an honor for me. He's like, I've wanted to fight this guy since I was 18 years old because I watched him and I'm like, that dude is a savage and I want to fight against a guy like that. He gets the assignment and then he's knocked out in 38 seconds. I know it was a hard night for Niko Price, but Robbie Lawler gets the highlight reel finish. And then, as you said, the tribute video played in. I mean, they've got "Thank You, Robbie" over all the graphics inside the arena at T-Mobile Arena. And they play this video, and you can see the tears kind of welling up in his eyes as he's watching this career retrospective. I mean, just bravo to the UFC for sending off a legend like that. One of the best send-offs we've ever seen for a UFC fighter, for sure. It's
so good to see a legend walk out of that cage on a high as well, because we don't see it a lot.
It's not. It's funny. We've seen it a couple times recently, right? Because Amanda Nunes had an amazing send-off as well, right? To lay down 2 title belts along with your gloves, to be a reigning double champion and walk away. I mean, that's a pretty good send-off as well, to bring your kid in there and have him dance in the octagon. And I mean, that was a pretty amazing send-off, but this is right up there with them. These are 2 of the best. So we've seen a couple lately, but man, there should be a stark reminder to people, like, this is not the way it always goes. Unfortunately, a lot of times it's bad, which makes these moments even more beautiful, because a lot of times it goes the other way, and these 2 legends got to do it in their way, and this was amazing for Robbie Lawler. It really was.
So I have a personal connection to Robbie Lawler, right? I have a personal story. Let's say this. So I have a dog. His name is Tillman. He's, believe it or not, he's 15 years old.
Wow.
Right. And I originally was looking for a dog right after I had cancer. And Mike Miller, who used to play for the Grizzlies, had this dog. I said, your dog's really well trained. Like, where'd you get him? And he's like, oh, hey, let me call you my dog trainer. This guy just randomly lived in Memphis. And so I got a dog, and then I worked with this guy how to train my dog Tillman. Fast forward like 2 or 3 years, I get a random call from this dog trainer and said, "Hey, I've got this guy. He's like an MMA fighter. He's here in town right now. I'm working with him and his dog. He's like, I need him to see how a dog and a dog owner that are both properly trained interact with each other. Can you bring Tillman and come meet us here at this house?" Yeah, sure. Didn't know who it was. I pull up. It's Robbie freaking Lawler. Dude, my head almost freaking exploded. That's a true story.
That's amazing. That's an MMA legend right there. That's not like just some dude that happens to fight for a living. I mean, really, as I said, I don't know if I've ever seen somebody more universally revered and respected on the roster as Robbie Lawler. That's amazing.
Yeah, so that's my Robbie Lawler story. We spent 4 hours together training our dogs together and all this. It was a fun time. Tremendously nice guy. I mean, he wasn't that personable, I'll be frankly honest, but he was very, very nice.
It's wild. That's just who he is. Like, he's incredibly polite, incredibly professional, but just doesn't talk a lot. You know, he doesn't need a lot of words to get across what he's doing. You know, press conferences, interviews. It's like, you're not getting long answers. And if you ask him a yes or no question, you're getting a yes or no answer and nothing else. You know, you're going to have to ask him to elaborate a little bit. So, the legend in Robbie Lawler. By the way, Robbie says, look, I'll definitely still be around. He's like, I'm going to keep training. He's like, I'm going to keep coaching. I'm going to help other guys in the gym. You know, people help me. And he said, look, that's what I believe martial arts is all about. You know what I mean? Is giving back and passing on the lessons I've learned. So you will still see Robbie Lawler around the sport. You will just not see him step into the cage.
Well, now he can have fun training. As he said, training camps, it wasn't fun anymore.
Yeah. He said I could torture myself more. He's like, it's hard for me right now because I have to let myself recover. He's like, what I'm really looking forward to is being able to torture myself in the gym more because I don't have to worry about my recovery. I'm like, you are a different individual, sir. Like, I do not look forward to torturing myself in the gym ever. And you're like, I'm going to retire from fighting so that I can train harder.
Yeah. Send off Robbie Lawler. We love it. Now, this is usually the point in the show where I say, hey, are you going to be in the Apex Center next week? But I know you're probably not, because what do we got coming up this week?
We got CFFC on 121 on a Friday night in Tunica, Mississippi, where I know I will be seeing you as well. So if everybody wants to see both of us in action, tune in to UFC Fight Pass on Friday night. We've got a great main event, Jose Perez and Chris Vassell. Kind of it's two really high-level prospects, and just from a clash of styles, it's going to be great because Jose Perez is a brilliant submission artist, and Chris Vassell is a hard-hitting knockout artist that can, put down anybody across the cage. Both have faced top-level competition throughout their careers. It's going to be phenomenal. Be at the Horseshoe Tunica Casino and Hotel.
I have a question to ask about this fight because I'm intrigued by it.
Yep.
Now I've ref Perez like 3 times now. One of them he got starched really, really bad.
Only lost his career. One shot, man. I think it was like 11 seconds. I mean, it was the only time he's lost in his career.
I was the ref in that cage, and believe it or not, like I had to full on bull rush the other guy and kind of take him down because it was a pretty bad knockout. And so after that, I was like, I was reffing his next fight. I was like really on my P's and Q's. I'm like, okay, I saw this guy get knocked out bad. I got to be like pretty close in case there's some big shots coming. And he's such a great submission artist that I guess subconsciously I was really focused on make sure like whatever happened on the feet, I was very diligent in watching it. And he stayed in the pocket with this guy the whole time. And I was like, okay, he ain't just a submission guy. And then he goes and he wins that fight. He looked spectacular. He's had a couple title defenses from there. And now with his resume, what he has done in CFFC, is he one victory away from the call-up?
100%. Yeah, I think he absolutely is. Yeah, it's wild, man. You ref that one fight, and he absolutely got clipped. But he's had some battles since then, man. If you go watch his fight with Paul Capaldo at CFFC 105, that's on Fight Pass. Yeah, amazing fight. Fight of the year candidate for all of UFC Fight Pass. So the guy is actually a stud. But, again, Chris Vassell, a guy that has done nothing but face top competition and can absolutely put your lights out. He had a very competitive fight last time out and landed a big third-round knee. So, but yeah, Jose Perez, I believe if he wins, will get the call. Chris Vassell, I don't think he would necessarily get the call right away, but he would certainly put himself in line for, a couple more fights. Both these guys, again, have faced tough competition along the way, so it's going to be a good fight. And the whole fight card is absolutely – I just got done with a production card of this meeting. It's a good-looking card. I'm looking forward to it. So, be a lot of fun. And like I said, I'll be on the call. Our man CM Punk will not be there. He's got some other activities. But Andre Petrosky is going to step in, and he'll be on the mic as well. That'll be on Fight Pass. And, of course, you'll be in the cage. And I just want to say, not only will you be in the cage, but you will be, I mean, I feel like we buried the lead of the whole show, to be honest with you. I don't even know why we're sitting here talking about UFC 290, but eagle-eyed viewers of the UFC may have noticed a couple weeks back, you were in the Apex as well. I'm in the Apex every week, but you were in the Apex as well, doing a little work alongside the Nevada State Athletic Commission. So kind of enhancing the training a little bit, getting a little experience at the highest level. I'm sure you're going to bring to the cage on Friday night.
Yeah, it was a mind-blowing experience, you know, with the evolution of the PFL, with the evolution of Bellator, and with UFC literally running shows every week. The pool, and this is coming from the higher ups in the commission, saying the pool of quality referees is really dispersing amongst all these high shows, and they needed other people who they thought were at that higher caliber. Thank goodness that they, you know, think I am. And so we said, but the process is you need to learn the professionalism behind the scenes, because the way the professionalism is in the UFC and these higher level events isn't how it is in the regional scene. I'll give you an example, right? And you know this because you've seen it 100 times, but I'm sure the common fan does not. In a regional setting, right? Let's say CFFC, I conduct one fighter meeting. All the fighters are just in one room, and I conduct one, and I just say, hey, listen, you know, this bout is contested under the unified rules of mixed martial arts in conjunction with the state of Mississippi. You know, luckily they go hand in hand. I'm going to go over a few, you know, just talking points here. You know, this is how I define the back of the head. This is how I define the grounded opponent. This is how Mississippi does allow 12-6 elbows where no other commissions. Guys, be mindful of that. You know, if a shot happens in the back of the head and you turned it, it's not on the person who hit, it's on the person who turned their head. But if you reach back and cock back and hit again, now it's on you throwing the punch because you knew his head was turned. And I give this one meeting, it lasts about 20 minutes, okay? On these higher level shows, you one off every single one with every single fighter. So let's say I'm on a call and I got 5 assignments on a 10 fight card. I got 5 reffing assignments. That means I need to give 10 separate fighter rule meetings. And I have to have the ability for every coach, every fighter, every cornerman to ask me specific questions, to air their concerns, their grievances. And then, you know, and that just gets expanded. So they were saying, you need to learn, we know you can give fighter meetings, but you need to learn how to do it one off. You need to see the production. It's not just timer. Are you ready? All right. You ready, fight. Now there's production involved. Because you got to talk to the stage manager, right, and make sure that they're ready to go. That we're back from commercial break, and that we're as a team we're ready to promote. I mean, absolutely. So I had to learn those professional, and then doing it from the guys that are top of class, the Nevada State Athletic Commission. You know, Mark Smith. You know, Herb Dean. Herb Dean attached me to his hip all night. This is how cool Herb Dean is, by the way. We sat down. I believe it was Mark Smith was in the cage, and Herb Dean said, okay, talk me through this now. Where should you be? What are we doing? And he was making me ref the fight sitting next to him cage side while the fight was going on in the ref in the cage. That's awesome. And saying, would you be in that position, Eric? And there was a couple points I said, actually, I wouldn't. And he goes, why? And I said, well, because that's not the open side. And I'd come around here because I think if the takedown happens, it's going to roll this way. He's like, absolutely correct. And then boom, Mark Smith immediately transitioned to that side. I said that it was going to transition to, but those are the nuances that you have to learn, and being able to do it from Herb Dean, Mark Smith, you know, Kerry Hatley, and all under the tutelage of Jeff Mullen. Give me a break. You don't get a bigger opportunity to like expand your game than that. It was pretty cool, man. I was super excited when I heard you're going to get that opportunity, because you're right. Those guys are all professionals, man, and they've been doing it at the highest level. And really in Nevada, I mean, Nevada, obviously fight capital of the world, has always been a leading commission, but, you know, with the UFC Apex and the amount of events that are handled there now, you know, both during the pandemic and now, man, it's amazing the amount of reps that they've gotten. That I think they've even upped their game and gotten better because they just had so many repetitions
to continue to better it. So, and you're right, man. I mean, you named off all the organizations that are doing big things. We keep hearing that one championship may be doing, they came and did one event here in the United States. It sounds like next year they're trying to do more as well. So that's another high-level international competition. BKFC is doing a bunch of events as well. Granted, not MMA, but I mean, you need high-level referees to be officiating that as well. And of course, a lot of MMA names kind of do make the transition over to BKFC as well. So, really flourishing and cool to see you be a part of that because, again, I mean, I've seen you work. I mean, not just to blow smoke over here because you're my podcast partner, but obviously always been a fan of your work in the cage when we come down to Mississippi as well. So looking forward to it. But I was super happy to see you get that opportunity because there's some great dudes out here in Las Vegas.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate it. And, hopefully I get, there's a disconnect. So people understand the UFC doesn't pick the judges. They don't pick the refs. The state commissions do. Now the UFC can recommend here and there, but so I was really not working for the UFC. I was working for the state of Nevada, the athletic commission there, doing all my training with them. That's who, Herb Dean, Herzog, they're all through that. And being able to see that machine that is the UFC work, even in an intimate setting in the Apex, is mind blowing.
It's pretty wild, man. They just got things down to a science, man. I mean, obviously these other promotions do fantastic, but the UFC, the machine is right, man. They've got it down, man. They got the systems for everything in front of the camera, behind the scenes that nobody sees, man. The operations. I mean, just as you get to see, like you said, I get to see it on a weekly basis, but the blue shirts around there, all the operations guys that are doing, I mean, they do such a phenomenal job, man. The whole team, everybody that's involved with the UFC, it's pretty incredible to see what they've built over the years.
We're going a little bit long, but I want everybody, the next UFC fight, I want you to watch the guys who open the cage door.
Those guys are studs.
Holy smokes. They are more efficient than a NASCAR pit crew.
I'm telling you, man.
Jump up and they have that pin pulled and the door opened literally within a second of the bell going. And you go to any regional promotion, that's a calamity of errors all the time.
All the time, man. We saw a situation not that long ago on the regional stage where guys went tumbling through the cage, out onto the canvas. So, yeah, it's amazing to watch. I mean, those guys are studs. They leap up there the stairs. They've got the door open. And you say, well, why does that matter? Because every second counts. For the coaches, obviously, but really for the cutmen more than anything to get in there and kind of to help those athletes. I mean, they've got 60 seconds and really not even 60 seconds because you're getting a call 10 seconds out to get out of there. Every second that they can get in there and apply a little bit of a cold compress, apply a little bit of treatment to cuts, those sort of things can really help to borrow a line from the legend Stitch Durand, one more round. If I can get these guys one more round, then I've done my job. And so it's they want to make sure that people are in there as quickly as possible to help these athletes out. That's
so I
great
encourage everybody on your next UFC fight that you're watching, watch the cage door open. In between rounds, it's actually
amazing,
impressive. But
they're
man,
what a fun athletes in the building.
Yeah, right. Like they say, the pit crew guys, NASCAR. That's what it reminded me of. So this was a fun episode. UFC 290 in the books. 4 knockouts, 38 seconds. Volkanovski reigns supreme. Pantoja wins. DDP getting a shot at that stripe. Bo Nickal looks phenomenal, and Robbie Lawler, hell of a send off. See everybody watch CFFC this weekend. Horseshoe Casino, Tunica, Mississippi. I'm in the cage. He's on the call. Man, fun episode. For John Morgan, I'm Eric McMahon. Enjoy the fights.